Welcome everybody. This is our first hopefully monthly community roundtable. This is kind of the brainchild of Ralph Gibas, and I think over the next several evenings on a monthly basis we'll talk about a number of subjects, hopefully subjects that pique your interest, hopefully something that you want to talk about or think about or something such as that. So we do appreciate you taking the time this evening to join us. We're going to talk, I think as the title said, about the virtues or demerits of college versus tech schools. That's an issue that's long generated a lot of interest. I can go back to my career in politics. It was a hot item back then. A lot of changes have taken place. And so I think we really have a nice subject tonight, and we have some really good panelists. And our format is going to be kind of free-flowing. We're just going to talk about the issue, may have a few questions. I think as we go forth, the discussion will generate questions, and so I think we'll have a nice evening tonight. I do want to introduce the panel. We have Ralph Gibas with us, who's retired military, Travis Turkelson, who works for Golden West, Pastor Kathy Chesney with us, who is the minister with United Church here in Phillip and is also very instrumental in the ambulance service, and then Jeff Riekman, who is the superintendent here for our school system. So we've really got a nice panel. I think the first thing I want to do, just so we kind of lay the groundwork of our history, is to go around and have each one of these panelists give us a little bit of their educational history, what they did in life, how they trained themselves, how they prepared, and from that then perhaps we can start to really flesh out the subject tonight. So Ralph, I'm going to start with you. Just like to have you kind of briefly talk about your educational history.
Well, right after high school, I joined the Air Force, and when I got out of the Air Force, I went to the University of Dayton and received a degree in psychology. And after that, I went on to get a master's in counseling and drug abuse and alcohol, worked in intensive care. I found that when you get a degree in psychology, you're not going to do much with it, so you have to go on and do something else. You have to go on to some sort of counseling. So that worked out really well. There was a time when I wanted to be an industrial arts teacher. That's when we had industrial arts in the high schools. And I thought that was interesting. I went to Northern Illinois University, and learned a little about welding and draftsmanship and things like that. But I appreciate the education that I have in using it. I'm here today in this TV studio because in my hometown I worked with a public access TV station, and I find that it's really a good way. You know, Phillip's small town, and we have a TV station. There's only probably a half a dozen in the whole state of South Dakota. There's one in Pierre and one in Rapid, and I believe there's a couple other ones. But it's a great way of communicating to the community what's going on in the schools, especially. Right now we're doing a lot of volleyball. Lots of volleyball, and it's really fun to watch the girls play, and football. So I could go on, but I better stop.
You better stop, and let's then let Travis talk about his educational experience.
I graduated from Phillip High School here in 2000. I think it was about March of my senior year. It kind of dawned on me I didn't have a plan for life, and I better get one. So kind of did some research and looked into telecommunications industry. Knew some of the local guys here in town. They seemed to have a really and we're happy there, so I enrolled at Mitchell Tech, got accepted into the telecommunications program, graduated in 2002. After that, got a job for a technologies company in Hill City, so I was already in the workforce at 20 years old, which was a benefit, I thought. Worked for the technologies company for 3 years, and then I've been with Golden West now for almost 14. It'll be 14 in January. Couldn't be happier.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Kathy, I know you've had a lot of education in various fields, so let's hear about that.
Well, I graduated from Port Huron High School in Port Huron, Michigan, and we were talking about class sizes, and I had 621 students in my high school graduating class, and we were the small class in town that year. From there, I went to a community college for 2 years, mainly because I didn't take high school seriously and didn't have a grade point average that I could get into anything more. At that time, I couldn't get into a four-year university, so I had to go establish myself at a community college. I got an Associate of Arts degree, and then I transferred to a private school, to the Margaret Upton Conservatory of Music of Olivet College. I have a bachelor's in music education. That's what got me to South Dakota. I came out here as a band director in White River. But I knew I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life as a band director. I then went to SDSU through the West River Graduate Center, and I have a master's in counseling. I spent 12 years working as a school counselor in Jones County. And at that point, one of my favorite things that I did was to sit down with young people and help them sort out what they might be interested, to take their likes and their dislikes. Well, how can we take your likes and turn it into a career that you're going to enjoy? And when you enjoy something, you succeed at something. And then life plans changed, and I also have a Master's of Divinity. And here I am today.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And Kathy might talk about the healthcare thing, but we can get into
Well,
that later.
I'm also a nationally registered, state-certified, state-licensed paramedic.
Which is awesome for a fellow. Okay, Jeff, do you want to talk about your experience a little
Okay,
bit?
thank you. I graduated high school in Lake Andy, South Dakota. As a senior in high school, I wasn't really sure of my plans either, but at that time it seemed like most people were going to a four-year college, and that's what I chose. I went to Black Hills State for 1 year. More or less, I wanted to play a little football, and schooling was kind of secondary. After out there, I transferred to SDSU. Not really knowing exactly where my place was. I was just taking some classes and doing some credits. And I was also working on the side in a warehouse type employment. And during that time, I decided that maybe college wasn't for me. So I took about 3.5 years off from my bachelor's degree and just worked in the workforce as a laborer at it was actually a coast-to-coast warehouse along the interstate. And I think that experience made me realize the importance of the education, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I had a firm belief I wanted to be a teacher. I had several family members in teaching and administration already at that time. So that kind of drove me to finish up my schooling, get my degree from SDSU, taught egg education at Howard, South Dakota for 8 years, which is CTE, the career and technical education. Had the opportunity to influence a lot of kids there, to talk to them about whether 4 year or 2 years, because we had a lot of interest in Brookings all the time, and had a lot of egg kids, so a lot of kids interested in Brookings and a lot of kids interested in Mitchell Tech. So I was able to help them make their decisions on what they wanted to do. During that time, while I was teaching in Howard, I commuted back and forth on usually one night a week, and some weekends, some weeks during the summer, and I received my master's degree in educational administration from SDSU. After that was completed, I moved to Phillip, took a job here as high school principal athletic director. And during my time here as that, I commuted to one weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer, almost like being in the Guards, to receive my educational specialist superintendent endorsement degree. And that's kind of where it led me back here today.
Okay, good. Thank you, guys. I'll just briefly touch about my experience as well. Graduated from Kanoka High School, and I hold this out as being quite unique. I'm probably the only guy in the world that can sing the fight songs for Kanoka High School and Phillip High School. And for whatever that's worth. At any rate, graduated in '69, went to SDSU for 1 year. Kind of like a lot of kids, really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was in the pre-med program, had way too much fun. Grade point didn't quite work. Stayed out a year and got married. And really, if you want to talk about something that will improve your grade point average, it's a spouse. We then went back to the University of South Dakota for 3 years where I graduated. Did not get into medical school. Actually wound up with a degree in English, although I have all the chemistry, all the biology, all the stuff. But I love to read, love to write, so at that point my dad was ill. Went back to the ranch in about 1975 and spent 20 years there, and I had an opportunity to come to work here in Philip at First National Bank, and so that's kind of my career path. But as you guys talked, it struck me that our careers and our educational paths are pretty unique. There are four of us actually sitting here with 4-year Regent degrees, and one gentleman with a trade school or tech school degree. And yet I would challenge anybody to look at us and tell any difference. Those of you who know us won't be able to tell any difference in terms of success or anything like that. And I think that actually speaks loads about the importance of tech schools, especially over the last few years. So the next thing I want to just wander around the table here, talk a little bit about your education and your career path. And we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I'd like to flesh that out a little bit for those of you who are watching. So Ralph, you want to take off?
Yeah, I think I'll step back. When I finished my counseling and worked in intensive care with drug addicts and alcoholics, that was tremendous. I really enjoyed working. A lot of these people come in to a situation and they want help. And they are looking for a chance to clean themselves up, basically. And one of the things that I really enjoyed the most was group therapy. We used to gather in a group in a living room setting, and we would play a song. Maybe it's a song that they're familiar with. There's a lot of "Lean on Me" was one of their favorite songs. Then we'd hand out the lyrics, and they would look at the lyrics of the song and say, well, how does this relate to me? And I think one of the things that benefited wasn't me as a counselor, was them sharing with each other, well, that's how I felt, or that's what I was going through, or whatever. And they really helped each other get better, more than I think the counselors do. So you just, it's like Abraham Maslow said, if you provide a plant with water and sunshine and fertilizer and everything, then they grow. And I think the same thing applies for people, and especially people that are dealing with a situation where they're an addict, either in drugs or alcohol, or trying to get themselves in a better shape so they're not, I don't know what more to say about that, except there's a lot of out there that need help and that want help, and they just didn't find it for them, you know.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Travis, your path may have been a little bit narrower than some of the rest of us, but you might just talk about how you chose to go to a tech school versus your consideration of a 4-year Regent school, something like that. And frankly, you're a shining example of the benefit of tech schools and how a person learns a trade, acquires a career, makes it in life.
Yeah, I didn't excel in high school, and a lot of that was my own doing. You know, I kind of skated by with not great grades, and college to me, I mean, it just wasn't something that I was really interested in. I didn't want 4 more years of school. I kind of wanted to get into the workforce, and I've always felt like it's kind of the husband or the man of the house's responsibility to provide for the family, right? So I wasn't going to be able to get a good job without going to some kind of schooling. So I love this community, I love this state, and Golden West seemed to, I didn't know a ton about the company, I just knew a lot about the people that work there, and they seem to have really stable lives, really stable careers. So that kind of sparked my interest, and I went and checked the school out. The program seemed interesting, and so I dove into it. I mean, honestly, when I was in high school, for a tech company, I probably wasn't that guy, right? And I would argue today I'm probably still not that guy, but I've been fortunate to, once you get your career established, I believe, and you get in a place that you like to work, if you have a good attitude and a decent work ethic, you probably can branch off inside that company to maybe what suits you better. So I've drifted a little bit away from the technical side, and I work a lot more with people now than I did when I first started my career, and it's made the job much more enjoyable. I've always liked it, but I really prefer the people side of it more than the technical aspect. So even though it seems as though the tech schools kind of give you a little bit narrower career path, which is partially true, once you get into an established business, I think where you want to go, you can get there with the right mindset.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, how about you?
Well, like I said, I started off at a community college in Michigan, which is, back then, it was similar to a tech school because only about a third of the school was actually prepping for a four-year college. The rest of it was your technicals. It was your auto works. It was those types of hands-on skills types of things. And then when I transferred, I knew I was going to do music. It was just different things. But what I've learned is each of my careers that I've had have led to serve me for where I'm at now. Whether it was the music, whether it was the paramedicine, the counseling, I use all of those skills every day. And I think any type of education that you have, just like Travis was saying, it grows. And whatever you're doing at the time, you do it the best you can. So all of the education coming together has been very valuable, whether it was my 2-year degree, whether it's been one of my master's degrees. They each, I feel, have a very important place in life and in getting us from point A to point B. And if I remember correctly, a statistic that an average adult will change careers 7 times in their lifetime, requiring some kind of retraining. And it may just be a 6-week retraining, it may be another degree. But 7 times in their life is the average. Last time I was reading any of that type of stuff.
That's an amazing statistic, and I'm not sure that would bear out in Hawken County, perhaps, but nationwide, I suppose that is true. So, Jeff, how about you?
Kind of like I said before, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I had very supportive parents. And also, my dad was at a 4-year college degree. My mom had always been a stay-at-home mom, kind of self-educated herself in the real estate business and local politics, and they were always very supportive. I come from a large family. There's 9 of us kids in the family, and 4 of us were in education. And at that time when I was in school, I already had a brother and a sister that were our school administrators. So I kind of knew, watching them and grow during their careers, that's kind of the path that I wanted to be. I will concur with Roger when he said getting married is what's the best thing about straight and narrowing out, because about that time when I said I took a couple years off and then went back to school, that's about the time Lori and I got married too, and it was kind of
really flipped the switch.
Kind of flipped the switch and got things done. The importance of a tech school versus that, if I had to look back at it now, I don't know that I would ever do a different path than the 4-year college, but we do have great tech schools in our school, in our state, and I never tell a kid that they're making a mistake if that's their choice they want to make and go to.
That's a nice segue into kind of my thoughts, which I think will bring us back a little bit closer to the subject at hand. But Kathy, I want to also respond to one of the comments you made regarding your education and that you use one portion of it every day. Most people would look at me and think, well, how can a guy with a degree in English be a banker? And I use that writing skill, those ability to read, to diagram sentences every day. So you really never quite know exactly where you're going to be. But I want to just mention this as we kind of narrow the focus a little. I was a four-year college degree, grantee, I guess you could call that. A couple of my brothers were, so education was pretty strong in our family. And when my kids were young, I always said, I told them, it's a state law that you have to get a college degree. And two of them did, and the third one didn't. But as I look back, you know, I was terribly mistaken by making that comment. But I will, in my own defense, say that the complexion of four-year regional schools versus the tech schools has changed. And so I think I can hide behind that a little bit. But that's kind of what we're talking about this evening, is the emergence and the strength and the success of our tech schools in South Dakota. If we have time later on, I'll talk a little about that from my experience in the legislature. But Ralph, did you, for example, at one point think that tech schools were maybe an ugly stepsister of the regional system, or did you think they were always really equals? And
well, I think they were always useful. One thing that just, while you were talking about the tech schools, both our presidents wanted to have shovel-ready jobs so they can put people to work. Well, the jobs were there, but there were no skilled laborers to fill the jobs. So that's why I think, you know, we're in a situation where the consideration of going to a tech school is really good. There's about 9 million skilled labor jobs waiting for somebody to jump into them right now. And so I just think that tech schools are really plus, especially with all the skilled laborers that we need to operate our daily lives, you know, the heating, air conditioning, whether it's a dental assistant or whatever it is, we really need this. And then on the other hand, we definitely need people with four-year degrees that can come out and do maybe the higher end in banking and finance and education or whatever. So I think I've always thought tech schools were a plus. Before I really thought about tech schools, it's community college, like Kathy was saying. There's a lot of community colleges out there that they're just preparing people to get out into the workforce.
okay, Travis, you maybe kind of answered that, but you want to add to that a little bit? I mean, you talked a little about leaning more heavily toward a tech school early on.
Yeah, no, tech school was, I'd say, relatively popular when I was in high school, or it was becoming relatively popular when I was in school. And I had maybe three high school classmates that went through the telecom, same program I went through. And then there was 2 or 3 other ones that went to Mitchell Tech at the same time. So at that point, higher education was getting pushed, you know, pretty hard when I was in school. But it wasn't always the push just towards 4 years. It's, you need a degree in something, right? If you want to be successful, you're going to have to get either skilled or extremely educated, one or the other. And I wish I knew now the percentage, but I would guess, you know, 25 to 50% of my class probably went the 2-year route, and they're doing well.
Yeah.
All of them seem to be doing well. Maybe the minor negative to that is we touched on it earlier, is kind of the narrower, you know, career path. You pick a trade, and that's kind of where you're at. But I thought Kathy's point was interesting with the 7 career changes over your work life. I've been fortunate enough at Golden West I feel like I've had 3 different careers already in this one place that I've worked, because I've every 4 years kind of have changed my role there, and I have this yearning to want to keep changing, right? So it's nice when you have that ability to, even though I went to the trade school and only got the 2-year degree, I have been able to somewhat change my career already 3 times. So it's been good.
Okay. And Kathy, you're one who's had, in a sense, the experience of the 2-year community college versus the 4-year degree granting one. So you talk to us a little about your philosophy and your perception of tech schools and 4-year schools.
I think what the interest is. You know, there are so many tech school programs that once you get that and you get into an organization, I'm sitting here looking at, Jeremy Schultes gave me a list of occupations from the hospital and what type of education it required. And then, you know, a number of them, there's 36 jobs on this list. 7 of them require a 2-year associate's degree. And then 4 of them require a bachelor's degree. This is provider set aside. This isn't PAs or doctors. This is hospital employees. And 3 of them require a master's. So then 4 of the 7 associate's degrees, once you get into that position, I know that there are ways to move up. So you start off with that 2-year degree and you don't have all of that expense. You get the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. You don't have to take a fine arts class. You don't have to take some of these other classes that you take what you need to know. And then you move into your job without as much debt, and you have the chance to move up in that job. You take a nursing degree, an LPN to an RN associate's degree. Well, then you get into a position, maybe you go up to a bachelor's of science in nursing while you're working, and maybe the place that you're working helps pay for that. So there are ways to take degrees, great entry-level associate degrees, that maybe you stay there, maybe you don't, maybe you move up in your education. So again, I think it's what's the interest? What's the interest? There are a lot of great 2-year degree entry-level jobs that get paid more than a 4-year job on an entry level. It's what's your interest and what do you want to do? I don't think one's any better than the other.
Okay, thank you. And Jeff, you had mentioned that you never discouraged a student or graduate from attending a tech school. And I appreciate that comment. I think that's spot on. But would that kind of stay on the same subject? Would that have been the philosophy 20 years ago or earlier?
Probably not. Probably early on in my career, or even when I was coming out of high school, those who going to tech school, to me, my only friends in school that were going to tech school were probably going to Mitchell, and they were the ones that were just going up there to get a 2-year degree, and they were coming home to farm. They were getting off the farm for a couple years, not really interested, and maybe picked up a carpentry trade or construction or mechanics to help them out on the farm. That was the majority of what they were doing, in my mind, that I remember. Now, from the educational standpoint, if I'll talk for a second, is I think education, as being in the educational institute, I see these kids coming out every day. Mrs. Menzel sees them every day. Mrs. Young sees them every day. We got to get to know those kids, lay out what their options are in front of them, and let them make the best choice they can. I know that we take them to a career fair every spring, and the 2-year colleges are there, the 4-year colleges are there. Most of those kids could walk in there and have a job before they walked out that door with electrical companies and plumbing companies as apprenticeships. You know, they'll train you, and a lot of those companies will pay you to go to Mitchell Tech, go to Lake Area, go to Southeast, if you'll come back and work for them there too. So I mean, the opportunities are out there for these students to do their research and find their niche and see which direction they want to take. We're just trying to guide them into that direction, and hopefully them and their parents can make what's the best decision for them.
Important to know that they walk out of there with a job and with a career, but that doesn't mean that they'll be a plumber or an electrician forever. More than likely they'll be a business owner or something else. Now we'll just share this with you. The Regenal organization deserves a little credit, because 30 years ago, credits from a tech school would not transfer to a Regenal institution, and a lot of them will now.
Yes.
And so some of those folks who came out as perhaps a plumber, but maybe they had 30 credits toward a 4-year degree, and they've moved on. So that's really been a complexion change with respect to the two groups. But we'll tell you, from having served in the legislature and then having served on the State Board of Education for a while, in the eyes of a lot of folks, there was a bit of a bias toward the tech schools. The regional institutions and the regions wanted those students. They didn't really want them out there going to 2-year tech schools or 3-year tech schools. So there was a struggle in the legislature over many years for funding. The situation then was that tech schools could not have dormitories. I think that's probably the same way. That's a real hindrance to recruiting kids to go to school there. And I don't know if that's changed, but
no, most of them have on-campus housing now.
Do they now? Okay, that's changed, and that's been a real positive step. So happy about that. I'm going to take us on to a little bit of thin ice here, and I want to talk about the political landscape of education, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the benefits and the great things that four-year institutions do. We don't want this to be slanted. But I do want to talk a little bit about the political situation and the idea and the ideology out there that our kids are sent away to four-year schools and indoctrinated with the wrong kind of political ideas, in my view. I'll take the credit for that statement, in my view. So let's just talk about that a little, and let's try not to be too political. But Ralph, you're a brave soul.
Well, President Trump recently said he's looking for people who have experience and skills, not just a sheepskin. And I think that's an important point. There are liberal arts degrees that people aren't going to do anything with. And so I think the political landscape is saying, yeah, we want to hire people who have some experience, who have some eagerness, who have get up and go, that can come and do the job, whether it be federal or whatever in the civilian line. I think that's a really good point. There's a lot that are saying, well, we want to have more people with sheepskins. Well, I don't quite agree with that, unless that sheepskin's going to lead on to something that they can do. Is that political enough?
That's political enough. That was very fair. Travis, do you want to touch that one a little about? I mean, you have young kids. Are you to a school where you may fear that they're taught ideas that you don't agree with?
Yeah, I think about that happening. There is a fear that could happen. Hoping to establish enough of a base while I have them at home to, I want them to form their own opinions and kind of make up their own minds. I do worry that, that is the time in your life when you kind of develop who you're going to be for the rest of your life, right? And the opinions that they are, I guess, taught around those years is a little bit frightful. Hoping they come back home enough to maybe straighten them back out when they get back.
I have a couple grandsons who are about to head into the college arena, so I totally get that. Kathy, what about you? You might have a different perspective from a theological view, perhaps, and if you want to, you can certainly touch on that.
Yeah, I am very concerned. I have great nieces and nephews that are heading into that arena. And I try to think back to when I was in my bachelor's and different things like that. It just seems like it's changed so much. Because I don't remember anybody trying to tell me what to think. Or that if we disagree, we had the ability to disagree and still like each other and not think the other person was bad. And that really concerns me about some of what you hear, yet I also understand, are we hearing what the news wants us to hear and not totally what's going on? And theologically, a lot of it to me is very, very scary. Because it's almost as if my perspective, and I'll own this statement, that if you strive to follow the Lord as your leader and your Savior, you're almost the minority when you try to be a good person and treat everyone equally. It's like you have to choose one side or the other. And yes, there are times you have to choose one side or the other and stand up for what you believe. But it's like we can't respect people anymore. And that scares me. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's well stated. Jeff?
I think you're right that when kids go off to a four-year college, there are different factions in that college that could try to influence them and teach them beliefs that maybe they weren't brought up with. Speaking from SDSU, the conversation you're going to have in the Animal Science Hall versus Scobie Hall is going to be two totally different deals. But I would bring it back to our family life here in Phillip, and our school here at Phillip, where we try to teach those kids on a day-to-day basis, not just the reading and writing and arithmetic, but how to think for themselves, how to make their own decisions. We have good, strong families that have good, strong faith, and hopefully they're teaching those lessons at home. That there's no guarantees in life when you send that kid off to your child off to a 2-year school, a 4-year school, military, workforce. You have to think that, all right, I did my job, school did their job, they're in good hands, they can think for themselves. So.
And frankly, this isn't new. I was a freshman at SDSU in 1969 and 1970 when the Vietnam War was going on and the protests were rampant. They shot students at Kent State. You guys probably won't remember that, but I remember it very well. They protested at SDSU and stormed President Briggs' office. Now that was almost unprecedented. Now, I don't believe it was at the level then that it is now, but that was a very frightening time. And I remember coming home and having a conversation with my dad about that. And I thank God he grounded me. I just felt like, those guys, yes, they have the right to protest, but I think that was out of bounds, and I do think it's probably a little bit more prevalent now than it was there. Maybe a little more pervasive. I'm not sure. At that time, they wanted to protect America. I'm not sure that's what's going on now, but that's a little bit aside. Kathy, you have a nice list there. And I would like to have you spend a little time on that, and that I think will bear out the fact that a lot of careers demand a 4-year degree or higher. And probably those folks, doctors for example, earn the big money. And yet it goes down the list and there are great jobs there. So can you kind of flesh that out for us?
Sure. As I alluded to a little earlier, I did spend a little time with Jeremy Schultes, and we were just talking about careers at the hospital. Good solid place of employment for a community our size, one of the major employers. So if a small town living is what you're looking for, a comfortable small town living is what you're looking for, then here, what does it require? You look at things like the director's positions or the coordinator's positions. Some of those are going to involve a higher level degree. The little more human resource management types of things, maybe some of the finance and accounting kinds of things that go along with some of these positions where you got to watch a budget. But yet you look at many of the degrees listed here, 22 of them, 22 of the 36 start off with a high school diploma or an equivalent. And then within them, the position trains you. Like for a CNA, you're trained here. In any of the dietary or in the dining room types of things, of course, needing safe food management, the Safe Serve program, or becoming unlicensed medical aid. The training is done within the job. So there's so many different levels of what you can do. The associate's degrees, you're getting into positions like radiology, the social services coordinator, licensed practical nurse, a 2-year RN degree, occupational therapy assistants, physical therapy assistant. Some of those are your 2-year technical schools. And then the RN can move up to a Bachelor's of Science of Nursing. Your occupational therapist, your physical therapist, your speech language pathologist, they all require a graduate school level degree. Many physical therapists have their doctorate in physical therapy. It's not a requirement on an entrance, but it is encouraged. And that's just looking at one place of employment in a small community. The opportunities of everything from a GED, high school diploma, some even not requiring that, but all the way through. So again, the importance, I think, is what's the interest? What do you want to do? What are you good at? When you're good at it, you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to do a better job. Just looking at one place of employment. In the emergency field, some places, like say just talk fire department, you can hire in and be trained on a fire department. Some will require, your big paid departments are going to require a 2-year fire science degree. Within that fire science degree, you get your EMT basic training. To be on a paid service, you're going to have at least your EMT basic. That can be done in a local community. I know you can get it, you can do it in a 9-month program out at Western Dakota last time I checked. And Presentation College actually has a 9-month EMT basic program. Paramedic programs, you can get an associate's degree in paramedicine. You can get a bachelor's degree in paramedicine, and that also gets you your flight paramedic certifications. Again, it's an all-a-stepping type of a thing. You can take an EMT basic in a local community put on by your local ambulance service. There are many ways to do those different kinds of things. And that's just medicine. There's so many different ways that that things can go. So again, you got to look at your interests and what your personal goal is.
One of those, you go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on. I
Gotcha.
really like that point you made of your interest. We talked earlier about this isn't one versus the other, right? We're just talking about
Absolutely
the two
not.
and the benefits of each, right? I think sometimes that college maybe gets somewhat of a bad rap now. Is, you know, there's a lot of people that go to college and either don't go into their field or don't graduate or whatever. And your point about interest to me is perfect, because some people are just interested in going into college. They don't care about the career, right? They just want to keep going to school, and to each their own, right? But I don't see that on the tech school side, because somebody is interested in a field and they want to hit the workforce and they want to do it as soon as possible. So they pick a 2-year career and they go there. I know a lot of people that just want to keep going to college or just keep going to school, right? Let's just stretch and be a kid as long as you can be a kid. And I don't fault them for that. I mean, I started my adult life maybe earlier than I should have, right? There's some that are 25, 26 years old and still enjoying school. So the interest thing is just, to me, is spot on. There's a lot of people that go to college just interested in going to college.
That's a great comment. I'm glad you brought that up, Travis. And one of the that you mentioned touched my heart, and that's a 2-year nursing degree. At one point in time, I think it's less than some, but South Dakota was desperately short of nurses. And that 2-year program really helped. I have a niece that went through that, and she has had a very successful career in medicine. The other thing I'd mention while we're on that subject is Phillip Health has a scholarship program. And if you feel a need to expand your horizons or move up the ladder, they'll help you pay for that. And then you work that off over time, but it's a great program. And during my time on the board there, I saw many times where folks improved their life situation greatly with that. So yeah, you make a great point in that. What's your interest? See it, spot it, go for it, and on you go. On that subject, any other?
Well, I would say I'd just address that a little bit. You know, it's a great list, and it lists everything in there, and it's just on what interests you and what you do. But the driving force with a lot of things, though, when people, you know, I hire people, and usually about the second question is, what's it pay?
Yeah.
And, you know, and they put out the statistics every year. If you only have a GED, you're probably going to earn this in your lifetime if you have a high school diploma, this much more, a 2-year degree, 4-year degree. But I've seen a lot of people that have started out in these positions, the LPN, the 2-year nursing degree like you've seen, they've gone through that program, got themselves established, and then went on to get the RN degree when they saw the benefit that would be for them professionally, personally, for themselves and their families. So, you know, and it's never about the job so much, it's about having that vision of wanting to see where you're at and how you're going to take care of yourself and your families, and always wanting what's best for you and everybody else. So.
Life's a journey, and sometimes it's really hard to find which path you're going to take.
Absolutely.
I've said many times, I changed careers at 43 years old, and that was quite difficult, frankly, but, you know, I could see that things were better out there, and so, okay, well, I'm gonna pick on psychology majors because I think you said you were one, and in full disclosure, this information here was provided by Ralph, and I trust that it's accurate, but it said 49.7% of psychology majors are underemployed.
Oh, I would believe
which
that.
I would agree. In my career, you know, looking at maybe political science degree holders and those kinds, they sometimes struggle finding meaningful employment in their career field. But further down the page, it says 64% say they're happy with the degree they pursued, and 61% said they still believe they can find their dream job. And frankly, most of them are satisfied with the career choice they took, which is a surprising thing to me. So maybe we'll go around the table here, and we're getting toward the end of our time, but we'll go around the table, and Ralph, I'll ask you, were you satisfied in your career? I mean, you bounced around a lot and did some things, so...
I wasn't at the time. When I finished my degree, there was just no job. I mean, you had to continue on. You're forced to. So if somebody wants a degree in psychology, they need to know that once they get that bachelor's degree, there's no whole lot you're going to do with it. You're going to have to go on and get some sort of counseling degree, or maybe there's a zillion things you could go into. But when you pick psychology, it's more than 4. And that's what you know, they need to be aware of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Travis, how about you? I sense that you're going to say, yes,
Satisfied with my
satisfied
career?
with your career?
Yeah, I am, but again, I've been fortunate to kind of be able to, my career's molded towards my personality now. When I first started, I enjoyed it, but again, it wasn't something that I wanted to do my whole life, and I've been fortunate enough to be a part of the leadership team and get to work with people now, and I've gotten some continued education into leadership, which I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I'm very satisfied with my career.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Definitely. Again, but like I said, every step that I took along the way, unknowingly, led me to where I am. Even though they may seem, some of them, you know, how do you associate medicine to a paramedic, to emergency, or emergency medicine to a musician? How do you know, some of those types of things may seem far apart, but I just think wherever you're at and whatever you're doing, even if you know it's only going to be a temporary time. I knew halfway through my student teaching experience, I was not going to be a band director the rest of my life. But I did it the best I could while I was doing it. And I let it grow. I needed time to grow up. When I came out with my bachelor's degree, I needed time to grow up. And then it just helped lead me in the right direction. You know, so I think it's just, whatever you're doing, whether it's a part, you know, you're going to be the rest of your life or not, do it the best you can. Whatever it is, do it the best you can.
How about cutting right to the quick, I suppose? Do the best you can.
Do the best you can, even if you know you're not going to do it the rest of your life. What you're doing, do it the best you can.
Good job. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't think I would change anything in what I chose and how I chose it and where I'm at and what I'm doing. Right now we're in kind of some unprecedented times, and you never know what's waiting for you every morning, or when you turn on the TV or what's going on. You know, like we were talking beforehand, what schools are doing around the state now. But no, I don't think I'd want to do anything different.
You're probably on the forefront of those out there that every morning when you get up, you don't really quite know what's coming at you.
Scared to turn the news on.
Don't.
Don't. I don't. I'll tell you so.
You know, I've been blessed, but I would say, you know, having a Bachelor of Arts with a degree in English, had I chosen that as my final career path, I'm not sure I'd have been very happy with that. I was fortunate to get to go back to the ranch and spend some years there, and then get into banking, and we talked about that some. But I might be the sole difference here if I'd have stayed on that career path. But Kathy, I think you mentioned that sometimes it's a journey, and every change is a step, and so I think we've all had the people in our lives that have influenced us and helped us make those decisions. You know, I think back, Roger, my oldest brother is your age, and when I was in high school, early 80s, I kind of idolized him, and I was going to go into the ag lending, like the stuff he was. But at that time, he was working for FMHA, and then I learned really quick that no thanks. Didn't want to go there.
No.
Yeah, I might sort of came to me. The results of my education and my work experiences led me to a point in my life where I enjoy service to other people. I think that's a big point. It feels very worthwhile to be able to help someone else, to be able to, whether it's in counseling or whether it's in everyday life, you know, and I think that's a result of my experience both in the service and in counseling.
Okay. I'm gonna paraphrase. Goes back to some of the information, Ralph, that you found, and I'm so happy I have that. Helps this evening. But one of them says 43% of college graduates are underemployed in their first job. Now, I would suspect that there are going to be some tech school graduates that will feel they are unemployed as well. So I'm going to kind of lump those together. But comment on this, you guys. Do you think the now generation, the millennials, those folks who really want instant gratification, where's that going with our future? Is that going to affect education? These kids want to get out of college and they want to have on their first year what we had. And Ralph, comment on that a little bit.
Well, I think, you know, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
What they want, and it's not going to happen. Then what do they do to adjust their lives? Do they fall back and regroup and think things out and go forward and try harder or become persistent in getting something else? Or do they just cry and go back and live with mom and dad?
That happens, unfortunately, a lot.
Yeah.
Travis, that's a tough question, I know, and so we're a little bit philosophical here, but I think it's within the realm of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I can speak to it a little bit. Some of the numbers you look at actually put me as a millennial. I claim the Gen Xers, but I think I'm actually a millennial. So there is, and I know I fall into that category of you really want instant gratification. It's, you know, I've been working here for a month, you know, what's in it for me type of deal. And Ralph said it right. I mean, there's a point of, it can be a positive thing to drive you to get to what you actually want, or you can give up, right? Because the things that I wanted aren't happening quick enough. So it's tough to be patient. It's going to get tougher as years go on. I see it with my children. You know, I was somewhat instant gratification with dial-up internet, and now everything is like you get it in a split second. So I fear that's what they're going to expect in their careers, probably in their marriages and in their lives, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for them, I think, to figure that out.
Definitely. Kathy?
I agree with what's, you know, been said, but like, I don't remember, maybe it was Ralph, sometimes you just got to drop back 10 and punt and regroup and come back at it. And if hopefully throughout you can develop those skills to realize life isn't always going to be what you want it to be. And but it's what do you choose to make that situation? Are you going to choose to work through that situation, or you're going to choose to let it beat you and defeat you. Because you can turn any situation into the good if you choose to up here, if you choose to in your heart. That first job, if it has to be at McDonald's, work hard, do it the best you can. Maybe that managerial job will work out of that. But you got to get started.
You know, I oftentimes tell people, don't weaken. Don't weaken. I say that a little bit flippantly, but not really.
No,
because you
got
can,
it.
and I will just, as I said, I started my career in banking late in life, and I knew really nothing about banking. And it took me 5 years at least before I felt like I finally so-called made the team. And I did a lot of kind of menial sorts of things during that time. Wrote a lot of stuff and whatever, but I'm not a millennial, Travis. I just hung on, and you're a borderline. You're not going to quit. I know you too well. Jeff, what do you think about that?
43%, it says 43% of college graduates feel underemployed or underemployed. In the education side of that, I'd like to see that broke down a little more into majors and what they were looking for.
That's a good point.
Because I know that trying to hire teachers every year, we're struggling to get applications. They're just not there at the universities. Or if they are, they're getting snatched up, and it's like that all the way around the spot. So I know there are majors that are 100% employed where they're at.
Sure.
I think
Absolutely.
off the top of my head, totally different than education is South Dakota School of Mines. Close to 100% placement rate every year, and one of the top dollar amounts in the nation.
Sure.
You know, for first year job people. So.
But is the statistic underemployed or unemployed?
This says
Underemployed.
Underemployed.
So do you think because they're going to school for this great career, they're only thinking about the top end of that career, like when they hit your time in life where you're retiring and you're at kind of the pinnacle of your career? Is that why they feel underemployed? Because they feel like the day one they hit the job, they're going to be at the pinnacle?
See, I think it's a state of mind as much as anything. I don't feel like I'm being appreciated here. Well, you probably are, but maybe you don't feel like it, like you've earned it. So that's a good number, and you make a great point about that's a pretty broad brush they've painted that with. But
Absolutely.
I know from the School of Mines, if you want a job, you're going to get one out there.
Yeah.
You know what, you guys, we
You're gonna earn it.
are nearing the end.
I think.
And go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, well, I think that 43% probably is a lot of liberal arts degrees. That there's no specific job they're going to get.
That's true.
Some basic liberal arts degrees.
And who knows with how that is defined on whatever survey that was. I know my first teaching job, today you would be poverty. Where the poverty, with one person in a household. Is that what they're talking about? There, you know, you got this degree. I wasn't underemployed. Was it the dollar amount of the first teaching job my sister-in-law got, teaching in the 4th highest paying school district in Michigan? What's the definition of that underemployed? Is what we don't know, I guess.
You know what, I think we've touched on the kind of the gist of what we're here for this evening. And I'm happy about that. We just have a couple minutes left. And did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna, if we're gonna have a couple minutes left, I was just gonna put a little plug in on the 2-year deal, on the 2-year colleges. Like Roger had says, they're much friendlier now transferring credits from the 2-year to the 4-year degree. And if people don't realize or understand or know too, our 4 4-year schools, Southeast and Sioux Falls, Lake Erie and Watertown, Mitchell Tech and Mitchell, and Western Dakota and Rapid City are all controlled by those local school districts there. But there is some shifting in that powers and stuff now. They now have their own board of directors, and people might not know that, but our very own Brad Heltzel is now a board member for Western Dakota Institute. Serving on that board.
And I can speak to that for just a second too. I looked into getting a bachelor's degree through DWU, and they were going to take I want to say 86 or 87 of my 93 credits
Yeah.
from Mitchell Tech and move them to that degree. So I know they're very transferable.
So that's really been a positive.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been very, very good.
I'm gonna
And it
count-
wasn't that way.
I'm going to count that as your closing comment and
Absolutely.
yours as well.
Got
So
it.
Ralph, wrap this up for us, and then we'll have Kathy, and then I'll close us out, okay?
What do you want me?
Just give some closing comments on the subject at hand.
Closing. Well, I really appreciate it. I think we had some good input, and especially for all those folks up there that are watching, to get a better idea, especially if they've got some high school kids that are getting close to graduation, where are they going to go from there? There's some good points around the table there. Hopefully that'll help them make a decision. And if, you know, there's not a whole lot of high school students that probably watch this tonight, but if there is, you know, help them, anything that's going to help them make a positive decision for their future is plus. And I think everybody added to that tonight. Everybody, there's a little different in perspectives. So I'm tickled.
Thank you. Kathy, just some closing comments.
Take what you like, look at how you can develop it into a career, because when you're happy, you're going to be successful. And whether it's 2 year, whether it's an on-the-job training, think about apprentice electricians. I mean, yes, it's nice to have the 2 years out of a community college, but there are, take your interests, develop them, be happy.
Thank you. Okay, well, those of you who are watching, we are at the end of our hour, and that was kind of the allotted time. I just, as I sit here listening to you guys and watching, this panel really is a good one. We have a really nice perspective on education, on theology, healthcare, tech school graduate, gentleman who looks at the full spectrum of education all the way down to kindergartners. And so we really have had a nice conversation this evening. I think if there's one takeaway, maybe two, it's one of the things you said, Kathy, do what you love, pick out what you want to be and do it. And the other thing would be that our overall landscape has become much more friendly towards tech schools. And that's a huge step forward for education in South Dakota, for career building, and for actually successful lives. So that kind of brings us to the end of our time. Those of you who watched, thank you very much for that. We have had a lot of fun here. I hope that you guys out there have enjoyed that as well. And hopefully you can join us again in a month, and we'll have another subject and have some great discussion. So good evening.